Sing one line out loud. Any song, the one already in your head is fine. You didn't. Or you did barely under your breath and then checked whether anyone heard. I'm not going to pretend that's surprising. What's interesting is the speed. The no arrived before the song did. You didn't consider a song and reject it. You refused the whole category. Somewhere in you there is a rule that says singing is a thing that gets judged and that you are not cleared for it. That rule is about 100 years old. It's younger than the light bulb in your ceiling, and nobody chose it. It happened to you, and the one man who saw it coming tried to warn people. Because for almost all of human history, there was no such thing as a person who wasn't expected to sing. Not rare, not a category. A research team went looking for the evidence behind a claim everyone repeated and nobody had checked: that music is universal. They read the ethnographic record for 315 societies. They found music in all 315. The anthropologist John Blacking put it more sharply. He spent years with the Venda people in southern Africa, and he reported that musical ability there wasn't a talent some people had. It was expected of everyone, roughly the way you'd expect a person to walk. The strange society, he argued, wasn't theirs, it was ours. We're the ones who cut humanity in half, into people who make the sound and people who receive it. And go back far enough and you stop needing anthropologists. 35,000 years ago, in a cave in southern Germany, someone took the wing bone of a vulture and carved a flute out of it. 5-finger holes. 5 holes is not a first attempt. That's a craft that already had a history. So what happened to you? Here is where that 100 years comes in. In September 1906, a magazine called Appleton's published an article by the most famous musician in America. John Philip Sousa, the march composer, the man who wrote the music your country still plays at parades, sat down to warn the United States about a machine. The phonograph. He was not gentle, he called it the menace of mechanical music. And what he predicted wasn't that music would get worse, it was that ordinary people would stop making it. The child becomes indifferent to practice, he wrote. It will be simply a question of time when the amateur disappears entirely. Then he asked a question about your mother. When a mother can turn on the phonograph with the same ease that she applies to the electric light, will she croon her baby to slumber with sweet lullabies, or will the infant be put to sleep by machinery? And then he wrote the line I actually want you to hear. About children who grow up hearing only recordings. Will they not sing, if they sing at all, in imitation, and finally become simply human phonographs without soul or expression? Sing if they sing at all in imitation. That's karaoke. He described karaoke in 1906, 65 years before anyone invented it. One thing before you decide he was a prophet. Sousa was not neutral. That same year he was in front of Congress, arguing that composers should be paid when machines played their music. He had money in this fight, advocacy not prophecy. He was still right about what would happen. He was completely wrong about why, and the wrongness is the interesting part. Because what Sousa expected was physical. Then what of the national throat, he asked. Will it not weaken? What of the national chest? Will it not shrink? He thought our bodies would wither from disuse. They didn't. Your throat is the same throat. Everything that made sound in that German cave 35,000 years ago still works in you tonight, nothing atrophied. Something else had already gone missing, and it had been going for 150 years before Sousa wrote a word. To see it, you have to understand what singing was actually for. Not performance, work. Picture a sailing ship in the 1800s and put yourself on the deck. 40 men have to haul a rope that no one of them can move. They have to pull at the same instant over and over for an hour. There's no machine that will do it. There's no voice that can shout the timing fast enough. So they sang. Sea shanties were not entertainment. They were timing devices. The rhythm told 40 pairs of hands exactly when to pull and turned a crowd into a single working animal. Stan Hugill, who collected them and was one of the last working shantymen alive, understood them as equipment. That's what they were. Now notice what's missing from the deck you're standing on. Nobody is listening. There's no audience, there's no performance. There is no good singer and no bad singer because the song isn't the point, the rope is the point. A man with an appalling voice pulling on the beat is doing the job perfectly. Your voice would have done it perfectly too. Then the steam engine arrived. The rope no longer needed 40 men, and the song had nothing left to do. This is the part people get wrong. Work songs didn't fall out of fashion. Nobody decided they were embarrassing. The occasion disappeared. When the machine took over the pulling, it took the singing with it, not because anyone banned it, but because there was suddenly no reason to open your mouth. And this happened everywhere at once. Grinding grain, rowing, weaving, nursing a child to sleep. Nearly every repetitive human task used to arrive with a song attached, and nearly every one of them is now done by something that doesn't need one. You didn't stop singing at work, your work stopped needing you to. But that only explains the singing you'd have done with your hands full. It doesn't explain why you wouldn't sing a minute ago, alone, with nothing at stake. For that I have to take you back further than Sousa, much further. I told you this was about 100 years old. That was only the part you could see. In 1995, a historian called James Johnson published a book about Paris, and it opens with a question so plain it's almost comic. Why did audiences grow silent? Because they hadn't always been. Go to an opera in Paris in the 1740s and you'd find people talking straight through the performance, moving between boxes, eating, playing cards, doing business, greeting friends across the room. The music was happening and it commanded roughly as much attention as weather. Johnson went through police files, memoirs, private letters, even the architect's plans, and traced the following century. Slowly, room by room, the audience went quiet. And when the room went quiet, something was invented that had never existed before. A kind of person whose entire job in a room full of music is to make none of it. The audience. Sit with how strange that is. For 35,000 years, music was something humans did. In about a century, in one part of the world, it became something humans watched. That's the split. On one side, the people permitted to make the sound. On the other side, you. And it was finished before the phonograph existed. The rooms were already silent. The seats already faced forward. Sousa's machine didn't create the audience, it found one sitting there waiting. And then it did the one thing no room could do. It made the performance perfect and permanent and free. Before recording, if you sang badly, you were measured against your uncle or the woman at the market or nobody at all. After recording, you were measured against the finest performance ever captured, played back flawlessly, as many times as anyone liked. You have never once heard an ordinary person sing your favorite song. You've heard the best take on the best day by the best singer available, corrected afterwards. And you compared yourself to it. So 3 things happened and not one of them was about your voice. The work that needed singing went away. The room divided into people who make the sound and people who receive it. And then a machine arrived that could do it perfectly forever, so you could hear precisely how far short you fell. Now let's talk about the verdict you handed yourself. In surveys in Britain and Canada, about 1 in 6 adults say they're tone deaf. That figure comes from work by Lola Cuddy at Queen's University and by John Sloboda and Isabel Peretz. Thousands of people, asked plainly. 1 in 6, that's an enormous number of people carrying a clinical-sounding diagnosis. And there is a real condition underneath it. Congenital amusia genuinely makes pitch difficult to process. An early study in 1980 put it at around 4%. In 2017, Peretz and a colleague tested 20,000 people with sharper methods and revised it down to about 1.5. So somewhere between 1.5 and 4 people in 100, against 1 in 6 who say it about themselves. Self-diagnosis is running 4 to 11 times ahead of the condition. Those same researchers found something else worth knowing. When ordinary people say tone deaf, they don't mean they can't hear pitch. They mean they can't sing. It isn't a diagnosis at all. It's a memory of one room, usually one person, and something that got said. But I want to be careful because if you're in that 1 in 6, you already have your story. The rest of you don't. 5 out of 6 people didn't sing when I asked and have no diagnosis to point at. No verdict, no incident, you simply didn't. And nobody has ever counted you. There is no study of how many people stopped singing while making dinner. It was never measured because until very recently it would have been like measuring how many people talk. There's a room in the American South where they still do it the older way. Shape note singing, the sacred harp. The singers sit in a hollow square facing one another. There's no audience because no seats face the right direction for one. Nobody auditions. Loud is a virtue. You aren't trying to sound beautiful. You're trying to be part of a sound. Anyone can walk in. That isn't a slogan, it's the rule. I'm not going to tell you to go and sing. That was never what this was about. But the next time the no arrives before the song does, notice how fast it moves and remember that it isn't yours. It was built out of steam engines and silent rooms and one perfect recording of somebody else. And it was built recently, on top of 35,000 years of people who wouldn't have understood the question. The voice you think isn't good enough is the only one your ancestors ever had. They used it every day. Dimly opens one of these doors every week. Subscribe and stay curious.